This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Today we're going to talk about what kind of effects the COVID virus is having on illegal immigration across the U.S. southern border. Now, about a year and a half ago, I was reporting from the U.S. southern border and got a chance to meet an awesome family, the Johnson family, that lives kind of in the boot heel of New Mexico. And I went out to visit them, and this is what that looked like.
While the tidal wave of migrants coming across our southern border dominates the news and the attention of the U.S. Border Patrol, transnational drug cartels are taking advantage of the surge to ship record amounts of drugs into the U.S. So far in this fiscal year, for example, Border Patrol seizures of cocaine are on pace to triple last year's totals, and that's just what gets caught. The Johnson family has been ranching 160,000 acres of the New Mexico desert for 4 generations. Joe Johnson oversees the ranch today.
Well, my grandfather came here in 1918. We've been here 101 years this year.
He's seen the makeup of people crossing his ranch change over the years.
I think people today, what we have coming through us mainly is the violence, the more violent type of people, more drug trafficking, more desperate type of people. This right here is what the Border Patrol calls 19 Canyon, right here. And we've been told many times we ought to stay out of here because of the danger aspect of it, but we can't. We have to keep an eye on our border, and this is where we've had a lot of cattle stolen right here in this draw right here.
The border in this case is nothing more than a barbed wire fence, which these ranchers built and paid for out of their own pocket in 1975. But drug runners cut the fence on an almost daily basis and drive across this ranch with thousands of pounds of cocaine, heroin, and other dangerous drugs. That's bad enough, but there's another risk the Johnsons have to face.
This is all keeping us apart right now, and we've had theft, people coming out of Mexico stealing our cattle.
Joe's son Russell says not having a border barrier has cost them plenty.
We experienced a lot of sickness in our cattle from all these groups coming through, running cattle off of water, sending the cow one way and the calf the other way, come back a couple hours later and get run off again by all these people coming through. And they were breaking out into pasteurella pneumonia, which is a stress-induced disease that if not caught within 24 to 48 hours, they're dead. And the traffic was so bad in that area that we finally had to pull all of our cattle out of there so we didn't suffer anymore.
The United States hasn't had an outbreak of hoof and mouth disease since the 1920s, but it's still common in cattle across Latin America. And what that means is that there's a risk to the U.S. food chain if these cattle or their germs actually end up making it north of the border.
One of our worries is these people from coming way south could be carrying hoof and mouth on their feet. Mm-hmm. And we're told that can last a couple of weeks, I believe, on someone's feet. If they're getting up here before that, they could be walking across our ranch with hoof and a mouth on their feet.
A report last month from the Government Accountability Office sounded the alarm about this significant threat. It shows the United States would be unable to stop an outbreak of hoof and mouth disease quickly, as there's only enough vaccine available to treat a tiny fraction of American cattle and swine that could be affected. And that could cost American ranchers over $19 billion in lost exports alone. Johnson says he thinks there's a cheaper solution.
It's a struggle for us every day. And a very worrisome. I think the only way that things are going to get better is build a wall on this border.
From the U.S.-Mexican border, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Okay, so I've got Russel Johnson on with us today to just give us an update and talk to us a little bit about what has changed since the last time I was there. Russell, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about since I was out there, like a little over a year ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. What has changed along the U.S. southern border across your property? Now, if I remember right, you guys have about, like a state down there. It's like 600,000 acres or something, and 8 miles of border with no fence on it at all. Is that still the case?
Well, that's slowly changing. Earlier this month, they started construction of the border wall on our neighbor's ranch, and they're coming our way with it. So in the next 1.5 to 2 years, we should have wall through the entire portion of our ranch that butts up to the Mexican border.
And what changes have you seen in the last couple of months because of this COVID virus?
Well, in our immediate area, it seemed like the illegal foot traffic had slowed down. We haven't had any vehicle drive-throughs since October of last year, which was, a breath of fresh air for us because those were really causing us a lot of problems, with the destruction of our fence. But the foot traffic had still been there. And once this virus hit, it seemed like it had slowed down. But today I actually ran into some Border Patrol agents that were out on our property, and a lot of activity. There was horse patrol, ATVs, canine units, and after it looked like everything had kind of wrapped up, I went over and talked to them, and turned out they'd caught 5 backpackers with bundles of marijuana.
Wow.
And
So they're still bringing marijuana across, even though, it's being grown on an industrial scale here in the United States. That's surprising. But I guess, do you think that that's an outlier, or are they taking advantage of the fact that, everything's kind of closed down now?
I wonder if they're testing the waters, because even the agents that I spoke with thought it was kind of strange because they hadn't seen dope through our area in a while. So they thought it was kind of strange. But along with that group of 5, they were also tracking another group of similar size through kind of the same general area. So I don't know if they're probing the Border Patrol right now, seeing kind of how they're reacting to stuff, or what the story is. But everybody kind of agrees it's odd that they're trying to push dope through our area right now.
Yeah, that is pretty strange. And actually, as I think about it, I wonder, I don't know, what's the penalty for them if they get caught running 5 guys with bales of dope through? They don't lose a lot in terms of cash value, but
Right.
as you said, they do get a sense of, what the coverage is on the Border Patrol's part. Do you think that might be what it is?
That's kind of what I wonder, if they're just probing them to see where their weak spots are at and how they're going to react to, mules coming across versus just regular, foot traffic.
Well, when I was there last time, I was really fascinated to hear you talk about how the foot traffic coming across posed a real threat, not only to your family's physical safety and that sort of thing, but to the food safety. It's actually a national issue because these guys can bring diseases across from Mexico that we've eradicated in the United States, and give those diseases to your cattle when they bathe in the stock tanks and things like that.
Right.
Is that still a concern?
That's always a concern, because especially like we don't see the caravans anymore, but we're still seeing people from countries other than Mexico. And so when you're talking about a jungle environment, they've got completely different, diseases and parasites down there than we have here in the desert. So that's always a concern of what they could potentially be bringing up and exposing us to.
So if now just for the people that didn't get a chance to watch that piece, can you explain that a little bit further? How if one of your cattle comes up with some disease that has been eradicated north of the border, what then happens to all of your cattle and even maybe all the cattle in the region?
Well, depending on what kind of disease it is, if it's something like tuberculosis or something like that, that not only quarantines our ranch, but that could create a statewide quarantine where cattle cannot move within the United States out of New Mexico. And then ultimately that could end up into a whole nation quarantine where we can't export cattle, which totally drives down cattle prices. So it's a huge problem, not just for the local rancher down here on the border. It could ultimately affect the whole industry.
Yeah, it's actually a national security issue if you put it that way.
That's our food supply you're talking about.
Right. So on that note, I saw this horrific image today of a pork farm, a pig farm, where they had to destroy all the animals, and they had this massive pile of carcasses, like 100 yards long. And they're saying that just because the processing plants are shut down and everything like that, and they can't bring people to work because of this COVID virus, that is threatening the food chain or the food supply when it comes to beef, cattle, and chicken. Are you seeing anything like that happen with your ranch?
We haven't seen anything like that, but we're hearing rumors that the euthanization of fat cattle that should be ready for slaughter, we're hearing that that's a rumor that could happen.
And explain to me why they would do that. I mean, why wouldn't they just, I mean, a cow is it that the cow is just no good after a certain point? Or, I mean, why wouldn't they just leave it out to pasture another year and then start over again or something?
Well, all the work and effort's been put to get these cattle to a target weight, and that's at that point they're ready for slaughter. They can't be turned out. You can't continue to feed them, or otherwise the meat's no longer going to be at that optimal, growth cycle there for harvest.
It would damage the quality of the meat, and I guess as I think about it, it would probably destroy their profit margin anyway, because they'd have to feed these cattle for another year or something.
Right.
And that wouldn't work. For you guys, though, if you have cattle that are not being sent off to the feedlot or something, you can just let them run out there and make more cattle, right?
Well, to an extent, that's still our income flow, and if that's shut off, then you can only run so far.
You got no income at that point.
Exactly.
Well, I'd love to buy a half a cow from you if I could get it down to Panama here.
Might run into some issues.
Yeah, that might be a little difficult to do, especially since all the travel is shut off between here and there. Folks, there's so much to this interview with Russel Johnson that I just am going to have to split it into 2 different podcasts. He's got a lot more really good stuff to share. And so make sure you come back next time to hear the rest of this story, because he's going to talk a little bit more about threats to national security. He's going to talk about what it's going to take if Donald Trump doesn't win the election and more. So make sure you come back for The Hot Zone.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.